So Chair, I know who you are, but for our viewers, can you just introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Jessica Vega Pederson. I'm the Multnomah County Chair.
So Chair, a lot of difficult choices today. How do you walk away feeling after passing that modification?
Yeah, it's so hard to have to make these difficult decisions around cutting things in our budget when we're in the middle of our fiscal year. And this vote today it was actually like the fourth vote that we'd had to take on the different impacts to different departments at the county. So today we were talking about homeless services and the really big impacts that we were having to make, the decisions that we were having to make based on the funding that was passed by the Oregon legislature and the way that it impacted that system. Previously, we had conversations and did votes around our public safety system, around our Department of Human Services and some of those safety net services that we provide. So it has been, and our health department as well. So this was kind of like the last vote we took of a series of difficult votes trying to adjust that budget.
And just to help our viewers understand, given that this is going to halt adding additional beds to save other expenses, obviously, does that mean we might see more people who are houseless?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that the department worked hard at, and I wanted to make sure that we were doing with the changes that we were making, is that we weren't going to be losing any shelter beds, and we weren't going to be displacing anyone who currently had dollars that were keeping them housed. Because I think that one thing that our community can agree on is it doesn't make sense if somebody is currently housed to take away those resources that would end them up on the street and adding to the number of people who are experiencing homelessness in our community. So that was something that I was really glad that our Homeless Services Department was thinking creatively. We're coming up with options of how we could try to backfill some of the impacts that we were having from the state legislative budget. And that is because at the county, we are thinking about the entire system. So it is about eviction prevention and trying to prevent people from becoming homeless. It is about getting people safely off the streets into shelters, but really having the resources to move people from the streets or shelter into permanent housing and being able to stay there and having the services they need to make them successful in that housing. It's about all of those things.
Given that bed space is an area that you guys had to halt expansion on, are you guys working with the city of Portland? Because I know they're expanding beds, so perhaps is there a balance you guys can create together?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's an important thing and was part of the conversation that we had during this meeting today was about that really important coordination between the investments that we're making across our systems, across our jurisdictions, whether it is the state, the city, the county, the other East County cities, to make sure that we are thinking holistically about it. So the city has ramped up the overnight only beds of helping to get some folks off the streets. What I want to make sure is that we've got the connections from any of those new beds that are being created into the larger system, into the rest of the system, about getting folks connected with those services, with the case management, all of those things that are going to ultimately lead to housing placement. So that was part of what we talked about today was the need to do that.
Anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think is an important conversation that we're going to be talking about both at the county and the city side is the updates to our homeless response action plan. So we've been having these conversations at the steering and oversight committee about what are the key performance indicators that we need to be looking at. We have much better data, more detailed data than we've ever had before. So how do we use that data? How do we look at that data and track it to see exactly what outcomes are having, and then what are our goals around those data pieces, those key performance indicators? So how can we make sure that we have a goal of increasing outflows of homelessness and decreasing inflows? How can we make sure that we are successfully moving people into permanent housing and making sure that we're tracking how long that they stay there? So there's a whole bunch of different ways that we're going to be measuring this data. And the important piece and the key piece to all of that is that we are going to be budgeting to make sure that those outcomes, those goals that we have around these key performance indicators, have enough funding to be successful in reaching those goals. And so we're going to be having that conversation over the next month here in the county and over at the city. And then I think it's going to be really incumbent upon us as a board of commissioners, as a city council, to fund the things that we want to see happen for FY27, because we know that there's going to be, we had to make some hard choices today in the rebalance. We're going to be having to make even harder choices next year when we're looking at the dollars that we're going to have.
Thank you so much for your time, County Chair.
Meghan Moyer, I'm Multnomah County Commissioner for District 1.
So Commissioner Moyer, you voted no against option A. Tell me a little bit about why.
Yeah, I don't think there are easy decisions to be made, and it's not a reflection of staff. I just feel like we are kicking the can down the road when it comes to understanding the depth of the budget reductions we're facing for the 2027 fiscal year. One of my biggest tension points was borrowing money that has been allocated by the state that was supposed to cover both year 1 and year 2 of the biennium, and the proposal that passed took $3 million from next year and put it into this year. And I understand it's to reduce the impact of reductions, but that really makes our hole even bigger next year. Now we've added $6 million hole to next year, and I just feel like hard decisions about the right balance between shelter and housing vouchers and other longer-term placements need to be happening now. The longer we wait, the harder those cuts will be to the system. And so that was really the basis of my no vote.
So Commissioner Moyer, another thing I wanted to ask you was, I know you're concerned about borrowing the money. What do you propose to do in place of that?
Yeah, I think that, one, I was disappointed, although I understand how difficult mid-year staff reductions are within a department, to see no savings from the administrative side of homeless services. I just don't think sends a message of shared sacrifice. I also have felt and heard from providers that they wanted to be having discussions directly with our homeless services department before that a plan was rolled out around, which cuts have what impact and how that system is going to be impacted by this strategy. I'm concerned that we are going to have a system that heavily focuses on shelter, but not have the ability to move people out. And long term, that just creates a ginormous bottleneck that I don't think is the right balance. I think we have to be really strategic about making sure that flow is still happening. We know right now that we're having about 1,400 new people a month being identified as experiencing homelessness. And right now our system is able to help 1,100 exit, which means every month 300 new individuals are experiencing homelessness. Our system doesn't have the capacity to move out. So for me, I just did not want to kick that conversation any further down the road. I have been pretty open through our budget process and through earlier conversations that I don't want to borrow from the future, but I also think we cannot have a system that is grossly out of balance where nobody can move through, because the backlog will be just more than I think the public is willing to see us.
What do you say to people who might think that making that balance more in favor of placements could influence bed space today and actually kick people out of their beds?
Right, and I think that when I talked about that balance, I do acknowledge that I do think there has to be more beds available during the winter. And so a proposal I would be interested in looking at, and I don't think that's off the table, it just wasn't included in this, is what's the right balance post-winter as we move forward. I care very much that people are safe and have access to somewhere safe to be. I have concerns about how the city is approaching the level of service, the safety they're making. I have concerns that they are not creating a shelter system that is appropriate for everybody, and it is not safely staffed, and the conditions, I think, are unacceptable. So I have real questions about, is that the type of shelter system that I want county money to be going into? And I want to have that conversation, because I think, if that's where the city wants to go, that can be their prerogative, but I'm not really sure that's part of the vision the county has, which is very much focused on ending somebody's homelessness, not just warehousing.
Thank you so much for your time. Anything else you want to add?
No, I want to acknowledge that these are impossible choices. This is not a criticism of staff or that this was necessarily not a well thought out plan. There is nothing easy about this. I just don't think people really understand the amount of funding that we have lost, the other partners have lost from other funding sources, the role the federal government is playing. We are in response mode when we want to be on offense. We want to be attacking this issue and improving it. And right now we are just trying to sew pieces together so it doesn't collapse.
Thank you so much for your time, Commissioner Moyer. I really appreciate it.
Shannon Singleton, I'm the Commissioner for Multnomah County for District 2.
So, Commissioner, a lot of difficult choices today. Tell me why you voted yes.
I voted yes so that we can balance our budget at this point in time, knowing that we may need to do further reductions, but I think it's critical that we give the department clear direction so that they can give our providers clarity on what their budgets will be, because some of these reductions will impact our nonprofit partners.
Yeah, any indication of what you guys want to do with the remaining $8 million hole?
So part of what the budget note that I moved forward and passed was really to take a look at that. Let's come back after this is implemented and understand what the impact was to our goals around housing placements as well as our shelter services, so that if we need to make additional decisions or budget modifications, we have the information we need to do that.
And you spoke with one of our colleagues about your concern about the inflow of people experiencing homelessness versus the outflow. How are you concerned that this budget might impact those numbers?
So this budget in particular is more about housing placement out of shelter. The impact to inflow does include reductions that did come from the state as well as local reductions to what is called eviction prevention services. And so that's really where we see the ability to stop inflow into homelessness. And I think it's really critical that people understand that we're seeing more people become homeless than we're able to house each month, which means that while we're doing really good work, we still have more people falling into the trauma of homelessness.
Anything else you want to add, perhaps, about how you guys plan to get creative to address that problem?
I think, some of our next steps, we have a shelter assessment report that will be coming in shortly. And for us, I think it's time to look at that with our City of Portland colleagues and talk about our shelter system and understand which shelters provide us the best outcomes, positive outcomes for people, whether that's getting into treatment or into housing. And how do we really make decisions that are putting our critical resources where we have the best outcomes for the human beings that we're trying to serve. And while I know it's hard for people to understand that maybe we have to close some shelters, I also think people understand that we don't want to just warehouse people in shelters. We have to have pathways out of that into housing. And right now, our system is over leveraged on one side of that equation. So I think there's a lot for us to look at, not just for fiscal year 26, but as we gear up for our budget for next year with the City of Portland.
Just a clarification, which side do you think the balance is tipped toward?
I think we're over leveraged on shelter at this point in time. We've heard from both City of Portland and their contractors, as well as our Homeless Services Department contractors, that what they need is more dollars to place people out of shelter and into housing. And it is not the right time to close shelter as we're about to embark on winter. So I do think it's important that we maintain what we currently have, but that we really come back to what providers are telling us they need, which is the rent assistance dollars to help people actually move back into apartments.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Singleton. I really appreciate your time.
It's Julia Brim-Edwards. I'm a Multnomah County Commissioner from East Portland.
So, Commissioner, difficult choices today. I know you were one of two commissioners who voted no on option A, which sort of backfills in many different creative ways. Tell us why.
Yeah, I voted no because, first of all, I don't believe the county has a comprehensive strategy on how to address homelessness. It's very disappointing that we've had hundreds of millions of dollars in investments, and the actual rate of unsheltered homelessness has increased. And we need to be moving towards having a net decrease in unsheltered homelessness and spending our resources in a way that accomplishes that. So that's one reason. Second, I was very disappointed that we brought these adjustments in October when actually the legislature passed their budget in July and the budget amounts were known. And so to wait till October is, don't think, good fiscal management. Also leaving many of the providers that provide direct supports to those who are living on the streets or in shelters to be scrambling to reduce their budgets mid-year.
Because you're more in the hole now.
More in the hole now. Also, the strategy that was suggested today and approved by the majority, or the strategy that was put forth by the chair, also borrows money from next year to fill this year's hole, just creating a bigger cliff next year. And the last reason was we made a commitment in 2024, the city and the county, that we, the county, were going to produce 1,000 additional beds of shelter by December 31st, 2025, and that we were going to also make progress on moving more people from shelter into housing. We don't want people stuck in shelter. With the resources that have been made and then the decisions today, two things have happened. One, the county is going to fall way short of its commitment to providing those 1,000 beds. And then second, it has not effectively met the targets that we set for moving people from shelter into housing. And so people are getting stuck in shelter, and when they get stuck in shelter, that leaves somebody who's on the street not able to move into shelter. So on all the marks, I felt that the proposal put forward by the chair not only misrepresented, I think, what the state, what we knew the state was going to budget us, and also created a bigger shortfall next year, and also didn't keep our commitments to the broader community and to the city about how we were going to move people who are living on the streets without basic services or safety, without access to services to get into housing, that we were not going to be making progress on that particular commitment.
What is a better proposal, if you could just sort of give us an idea?
Well, first of all, we need to have a strategy that actually is going to result in a net reduction in unsheltered homelessness and homelessness. And we need to be doing that in concert with the city of Portland and the other cities in the county. So that's the first thing. And we also need to be engaged in smart fiscal management and budgetary management. And I feel like this morning's vote was, 5 months later saying we're going to have a shortfall, and how do we make that up? And we're going to make that. I believe that county's not going to be making smart decisions that are fair to providers and that actually are fair to the people who are living on the streets, because they're going to be made mid-contract year and unexpectedly.
Yeah, I mean, when you're speaking to the number of unsheltered homelessness, when I spoke to County Chair Vega Pederson, she was saying that the city of Portland is adding beds, so this is sort of a balanced response. What do you say to that?
We have an intergovernmental agreement and a homeless response action plan that we agreed to with the city. And it wasn't, if you do something, we're going to reduce our efforts. It was the county committing to doing something and also doing something effectively. And that was not just creating the shelter beds, but also having a process for placement out of shelter into housing. And the county has not effectively done that either.
Anything else you want to add, Commissioner?
I think that's it.
Thank you so much.